was the largest party gathering ever held by the Socialist Party. It was attended by 287 voting delegates and 8 non-voting delegates representing 47 states, plus the District of Columbia, and 7 of the party's foreign language groups. Many historians consider the elections of 1912 to be the high point of the mass socialist activity in the U.S. Still others assert that the movement increased in relative strength in relation to the capitalist parties even in 1916, when the Wilson administration had already had several years to inculcate a vicious jingoism and chauvinism in preparation for the U.S. intervention in the imperialist First World War. The Socialist Party entered into a very difficult period. European parties had, by and large, capitulated on the question of participation in imperialist war and joined their own capitalist governments in the world's slaughter. However, the Serbian, Bulgarian, and Italian parties opposed the war, and the stand of the Bolshevist Party in Russia is well known. And it is significant that the Socialist Party in the U.S. condemned the war at the outset. Eugene Debs wrote in 1915, I am not, he quote, I am not a capitalist soldier. I am a proletarian revolutionist. I do not belong to the regular army of the plutocracy, but to the irregular army of the people. I refuse to obey any command to fight from the ruling class. I am opposed to every war but one. I am for the war with heart and soul, and that is the worldwide war of the social revolution, end quote. Debs declined to be the Socialist Party candidate in the 1916 elections. Instead, some other relatively unknown people ran. They still got 3% of the total. Some guy named Alan Benson, who later, ended up supporting the war. He was a really bad character. In the period leading to World War I, it was mainly the socialist and working class organizations which conducted the anti-war struggle, making it part and parcel of the struggle against capitalism. Pacifist organizations had little, if any, influence. However, in response to the socialist and working class movement, workers and farmers were opposed to the war. This caused considerable concern among the capitalists at the time. One of them, John Hayes Hammond, he observed some influence or combination of influences brought about a weakening of the patriotic spirit in this country when we find that neither the working man nor the farmers, the two great groups upon which our national life depends, are taking any interest in the efforts of the security or defense leagues or other movements of national preparedness, end quote. The combinations of influences which Hammond refers to by innuendo is that of the working class and the socialist agitation that was becoming more widespread in the period, taking a hold on a greater and greater part of the mass of the population. It took great effort on the part of the Wilson administration to, quote, turn the country around, for the capitalists, that is. It was done with a variety of methods, even including fraudulent incidents like the sinking of the Lusitania, which was a civilian passenger ship secretly loaded with munitions, making it a prime target of a German attack. And he also launched a vicious campaign of jingoism in the capitalist press. The Wilson administration resorted to arrest, indictment, and imprisonment of thousands of socialist anti-war agitators in an effort to silence the movement. It struck out against the many socialist and working-class newspapers and magazines by revoking their second-class mailing rights, making it financially difficult for them to continue to publish. Using the so-called Espionage Act, the Wilson administration inaugurated a period of witch hunting, which in many cases exceeded that of the McCarthy period of the 1950s. Nevertheless, the movement was not cowed. It continued to fight on, and in some areas became more aggressive than ever. The Socialist Party declaration against the war was embodied in the main resolution of its St. Louis Convention of 1917. I'm going to skip a little ahead here. The Emergency Socialist Party Convention was convened to consider its position regarding the entry to World War I. A strong majority of the emergency convention voted in favor of a manifesto against the U.S. entry into World War I, which had become known to posterity as the St. Louis Resolution. The resolution opens, "The Socialist Party of the United States, in the present grave crisis, solemnly reaffirms its allegiance to the principles of internationalism and the working class solidarity the world over, and proclaims its unalterable opposition to the war just declared by the government of the United States." Continued by pointing out that the war was one for crass profit, since democracy could not be imposed, nor could militarism be eliminated by any force of arms. Quote, we brand the declaration of war by our government as a crime against the people of the United States and against the nations of the world, end quote. And it added that they would mount a continuous, active, and public opposition against the war, and quote, vigorous resistance to all reactionary measures were promised. And this is important, vigorous resistance. You'll see in a few minutes why it becomes important. The Socialist Party of the United States, the resolution continued, is unalterably opposed to the system of exploitation and class rule which is upheld and strengthened by the military power and sham national patriotism. We therefore call upon the workers of all countries to refuse to support their governments in their wars. The wars of the contending national groups of the capitalists are not the concern of the workers. The only struggle which would justify the workers in taking up arms in this great struggle of the working class of the world is to free itself of economic exploitation and political repression. And we particularly warn the workers against the snare and delusion of so-called defensive wars. I'm going to talk a little bit about now something which most of us have never heard about, and that's the Green Corn Rebellion. Some rank-and-file members of the Socialist Party moved the anti-war struggle to another level. According to Sam Marcy, founder of Workers' World Party, in the book The Bolsheviks and War, quote, some took the road of arming themselves to resist. This took place in several areas, especially in the South. Socialists were arrested in Dallas, Texas, for possession of arms. In North Carolina, farmers in Chatham County organized an armed revolt against the draft. Outside Toledo, Ohio, someone fired on a troop train. These were scattered and unorganized efforts against the war, often not well directed. However, one very significant and dramatic struggle, really an armed rebellion, took place in the heart of Oklahoma. The Green Corn Rebellion of August 1917, a few months before the Russian Revolution, was a genuine working class attempt at an anti-war insurrection in what had formerly been called the Indian Territory of Oklahoma. It had in its ranks mostly poor tenant farmers, dispossessed people who had been forced off their land, and former railroad workers who had lost their jobs when the railroad strike led by Debs was broken in the 1890s. Among the participants were many black people as well as native people from the Seminole Nation. The rebellion was organized by an organization called the Working Class Union, the left wing of the socialist movement in Oklahoma and Arkansas. It had a strong affinity, if not direct ties, to the industrial workers of the world. I'd also like to add that the industrial workers of the world had been there in the previous few years organizing agricultural workers, and they would go on the trains and use various means of persuasion to convince people to join the union, even throwing off the trains vagrants who wouldn't cooperate. But that helped create a lot of support for their ideas. The working class, well, you know, you got to do what you got to do, right? The bosses did many things that were worse.